Today is a much anticipated day. I have been waiting for at least a week collecting eggs to try 3 different recipes for pickled eggs. If this is your first video here, my name is Ashley and welcome to my kitchen. I have seen some pickled egg recipes that are so good looking and I'm really excited to try. We love hard-boiled eggs in our house just as a snack, but these recipes are not only going to be hopefully very snack worthy, but also can be used in a variety of different recipes, similar to how you might throw in a relish. And because I've never pickled eggs before, we're going to try 3 different kinds. One is going to be more of just like a traditional with pickling spice. Another one is going to be super dill with dill weed and dill seed. And then the third one is going to be somewhat spicy, not too spicy, with some Gochugaru and then also some crushed red pepper flakes. So you may have heard me mention this before, but we have 4 chickens and they're all bantams, which means that those chickens are a smaller size, so we get smaller eggs. And I have been collecting eggs for about a week and a half and I've got probably close to 20. I'm gonna have to do a final count. I'm going to do small batches because again, this is the first time doing this and I'm gonna use my pint jars. So I should be able to fit, I'm guessing 7 to 8 of our bantam eggs in each jar, and then we'll have a little sample size of each of these flavors. I love trying new recipes and figuring out new ways to enjoy foods that we already enjoy. I have seen some people who make pickled eggs leave them on the counter for the pickling process, and I'm not gonna do that. I wanna keep it simple. I don't wanna have any risk of anything happening that I don't want to happen, so these are gonna go straight into the fridge. The first thing I'm gonna do is get all my eggs washed up nice and clean, and then get some boiling water on the stove so that we can get them hard boiled. Okay, we have 17 eggs in total from our chickens. And then I think I'm gonna also throw in some eggs from the store. They're a different brown, they're a lot darker and they're bigger, but I just wanna make sure that I have enough and any that we don't use in the jars, of course, we'll just eat. Interesting thing about feeding chickens, it's a great cycle that can help reduce the waste in your kitchen, or rather you can do something with the food waste in your kitchen. There's a few things that chickens shouldn't be eating, but for the most part, they can have a lot of scraps. And so they eat your scraps and then produce food for you. When I go to collect eggs, I always give them their chicken food then. So it's sort of like I give them food, they give me food. And I was actually we were overfeeding our chickens for a very long time, their chicken feed. And it's not that they had like a weight problem or something like that from being overfed, but what would happen is, so I built this gravity feeder several years ago. So it's a PVC pipe that we can fill from the top, and then it's got a spout that kind of tips upwards. The level comes down as they eat out from the bottom. And so we would fill that whole tube and noticed that especially some birds would just dig in with their beaks and empty the entire thing in a day, and it would just be spread out on their floor. So then we would wait several days because we figured they could just scratch around and eat it. But I have, in the last couple of months, we realized that this water's getting boiling, so it's getting a little louder. The stove's getting loud. I learned that chickens really only need about, I think, a third of a pound of feed per day. And so I measured it out, how many chickens we have and how much feed that'll be. So we have a really nice, easy way to measure with a scoop. We just go bring that out every day and feed them. And it works really well. So when I go collect my eggs, I go and give them their daily ration of feed. And that does not include scraps and things like that. If they've had a lot of things from our kitchen, bread scraps or whatever it might be, then sometimes I'll reduce the amount of the grain feed that we feed them, just depending on how much other food that they've had. As soon as this water comes to a boil, which is almost there, I'm gonna drop the eggs in boiling. Now, when I boil eggs just from the store, oftentimes I put them in the cold water, make sure there's at least an inch covering. But for fresh eggs, they can be a lot harder to peel if you do it that way. If you kind of shock them right into some boiling water, something about that makes them easier to peel. So even though we're using a combination of store and homegrown eggs, I'm gonna put them in as the water's boiling in order to make that process easier. Also, what I'm gonna do is boil them for 14 minutes. Typically, I would do less for our smaller eggs, but because we'll have bigger eggs mixed in there, I'm just gonna go for the 14 minutes and it should work out just fine. Here I've got my brine going, water, apple cider vinegar, white vinegar, a little sugar, and a little salt. Here I'm getting all of my seasonings mixed into the jars right now while I'm waiting for my eggs to cool down and my brine to get up to a nice low simmer. So here I'm putting in dill seed, lots of dill weed. I love the flavor of dill. Here is my Gochugaru, also known as Korean red pepper flakes. These are not super spicy. I typically have these around for making kimchi. They make a wonderful flavor and they also add really nice color. So the jars will be nice and red here. And I also have some crushed red pepper flakes. This is what's going to give these eggs a little bit of a kick. And so I'll go ahead and add a smaller amount of these. And then finally, I'm going to put in a pickling spice. This is already pre-mixed. I believe most of what this has is going to be some bay leaves, mustard seed, cinnamon, cloves, dill seed, coriander, and there's also some allspice in there. And now for the fun part, I'm going to peel all of these eggs. The way that I did it with dropping them in the hot water actually worked out incredibly well. There was only a couple that didn't come out really clean. Okay, when I mixed up my brine, I used a 1-to-1 ratio water to vinegar, and I went in with 2 different kinds of vinegar, apple cider and white vinegar. And I probably put a little bit more vinegar than water. I did 2 cups of water and about 2.5 cups of vinegar. These shells, another great part of chickens, you can recycle this back to the chickens, and them eating this will help to make the eggshells that they lay harder. I did have a couple eggs that didn't peel that great. You can't even really see that. Okay, they're pretty gnarly. Well, that one was the worst. There's 2 others that kind of came out funky, and then I got impatient with one of the big ones, and that one didn't peel as well either. But the rest look pretty good, and I'm just gonna layer them in. Another thing I was thinking about those bigger eggs that would be nice to have in here is they might be able to better plug the shoulders of the jar and keep everything nice and submerged. 6 more. How many eggs did I say I had? I think I said I had 17. Maybe I'm not remembering that correctly, but so that's 6 in each jar. Those are all the small bantam eggs. And so I think I'm going to leave this gnarly one out of the big ones and just go ahead and top each of these jars with 1 big egg. And I probably made too much brine, but that's okay because I can use it for other things. I find a lot of people recommend using it for quick pickles, which is you can use any vegetable and make a quick pickle for a topping. In with my brine, I also added the salt and the sugar because I figured we probably want that salt-sugar combination in all of these recipes. And so for the amount of vinegar and water that I added, I maybe did 1/3 of a cup of sugar, and then about maybe a half a tablespoon of salt. All right, so I used maybe half my brine. I didn't need to make that much. I was thinking about adding a little turmeric to the dill one, but I didn't. It's fine, we'll leave it as is. Yeah, that top one kind of floats up a little bit. Well, I'm actually going to use some lids that are spent canning lids. This is a great way to reuse lids. Don't just throw these away. When you open up something that you can reuse these in a lot of different ways. And this is my thing. I always say this, but I love that they have a rubber gasket because that's really important for keeping things fresh and not leaking and things like that. So because these have this gasket, I can actually alternate and set these upside down in the fridge so that that top egg will be submerged periodically as well. So I'm actually going to maybe not cap these. I'm going to let these cool down on my back porch. It's a nice cold day outside. It's below freezing, so it shouldn't take very long. And then I'll wait until that's done to put the lids and rings on. If you've ever made pickled eggs, please leave a comment saying what you've done, what recipes you like. I would love to hear about it. And we can learn about these new recipes together. If you want to see more of what comes out of my kitchen, please subscribe and we will see you soon.